welcome on into the program my senator, State Senator Jack Johnson. Senator, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. Good to be back with you. Hope you're having a good day.
I'm having a great day. I am better than I deserve. And I know that you have a very busy week as you all are looking to wrap up what has been, I think, charitably a very eventful session.
I think that is charitable. It has been eventful.
But besides the national media invading us and trying to take over the narrative, there's some tremendous work actually being done by you and other members of the legislature and our governor. Can you kind of just tell us kind of where we are as we're looking to wrap up as you're looking to wrap up the session?
Sure, Matt, and I appreciate you acknowledging that. And it's one of the disappointing aspects of this particular legislative session. There has been a lot of noise, a lot of distractions going on that sadly has taken a lot of attention away from what I believe to be some very, very good work that we've done. Of course, we started the session off with my Senate Bill 1, which prohibits now transgender surgeries on minor children, irreversible procedures. That was, I think, a very important legislative accomplishment. And then
yes, and thank you for your leadership on that.
Well, it's sad that we even had to take up that particular issue, but we did, and then we passed Senate Bill 3, which prohibits adult-themed entertainment, sexually explicit entertainment in front of kids. That was an important bill. It was controversial. It shouldn't have been with some on the left, but I don't know why they would have an issue with legislation that just says, hey, you can't do these things that are sexually explicit in front of children. But we got that done, and then a bill that I don't think we talked about last time, but I'm very proud of, is one that was brought to me by our state treasurer relative to what is known as ESG, or environmental social governance. And it basically, it was brought to us by our treasurer, but he wanted to make sure it was in statute to make sure that our state treasurer now and into perpetuity will make no investment decisions regarding relative to state tax dollars and trust, endowments, pensions, all the money that our state treasurer manages. ESG will not be a factor in that. As you know, there's a significant effort by some on the left to try to affect social policy via access to capital, and we have to stand up against that. And I think Tennessee is a real leader in doing that. And then of course school safety, which sadly due to the horrific events at Covenant School has become a bigger issue. The governor introduced a comprehensive school safety bill back in January that has been making its way through the system, but very proud. Over $200 million that will go into hiring school resource officers and giving money to schools to be able to harden their facilities.
Yeah, and that is the issue that I think voters across the state wanted you to address. And I think the governor has done a tremendous job, even before the tragedy, in recognizing that steps had to be taken to make sure that all of our children, our most precious asset, were as safe as they could possibly be, and doing things to ensure that both public and private schools had the same level of security when children go there to learn.
Absolutely. We want our parents to know that their kids are safe when they get dropped off at school. And we have some schools and some districts in Tennessee do a really good job with this. Some don't quite have the resources necessary to be able to do some things. And that's why, again, I'm just proud that the governor proposed and the General Assembly overwhelmingly supported a lot of money, but also a consistent safety plan across the state for all of our schools.
And is that something that you see being signed into law in the very near future?
I do. Two aspects of it. One was the actual legislation that put safety protocols in place that must be consistent relative to locked doors and access to schools. And then from a budgetary standpoint, appropriating money to not only make sure we have an SRO, a school resource officer in every school, but also a Homeland Security agent in all 95 counties, at least one in all 95 counties, to coordinate with schools, local law enforcement, to make sure that safety protocols are being followed. So again, very comprehensive bill, and yes, it's funded. It's in the budget. We expect, by the way, to have the budget up in committee for the next fiscal year tomorrow, and then hopefully get to pass it on the floor on Wednesday.
Great. And just logistically, do you expect that this session will in fact wrap up this week?
I do. We have mapped out a schedule for this week, both the House and the Senate, with a projected adjournment date of Friday. We've got a lot of work to do, but yes, we can get that done and adjourn on Friday. We have told our members, which we sometimes do, pack an extra set of clothes just in the event if we need to spill over into Saturday, just to wrap up any loose ends. But I think we can finish by Friday and get back home to our districts and again. Start talking to our constituents about some of the good things that we've accomplished this year.
Well, I got to say, you guys in the legislature have a very good reputation in Tennessee of finishing the work and getting it done on time, which I hope that you appreciate is not the case in a number of our state capitals across the country, despite their best efforts.
Well, you're exactly right, and I tell people we are a truly part-time citizen legislature.
Mm-hmm.
Most every member of the General Assembly, Senate and House, has another job. This is not our job. We don't do this full-time. We do get paid a relatively small amount of money to do this, but if you're like me, I've got 2 kids in college, and I'm not going to live on a state senator's salary. So most of us own businesses or we have other occupations. And I agree with you, Matt. It's a very effective way to govern because we come up, we do the people's business, we get it done in a reasonable amount of time, and then we go home. We go home back to our families and our jobs and our communities and our constituents. And I think that's better. And by the way, I think that's the way the framers really intended for our federal government to work as well. We've gotten far away from that, and certainly serving in Congress and the United States Senate is more of a year-round full-time job. And I do always like to point out, you mentioned the contrast between some other states. California has a full-time state legislature. Tennessee does not, and I think I would choose Tennessee over California any day of the week.
Yes, and that's why I'm always thankful that I get to live in Middle Tennessee. Now, in addition to all the work that you've done in protecting our children, which I am personally very appreciative of, having a 12-year-old that is in the 6th grade, and I don't know why it's ever controversial that we protect our children from any influencing things that they just don't need to be dealing with at that age. I wanted to get your opinion on the White House and their constant use of executive orders to try and upend some of the things that we have put in place both on the high school level and in the collegiate level as it relates to women's sports. You've probably seen the White House came out with this draft proposal that was really pushing this transgender agenda as it related to women's sports. And if finalized, and if it became the law of the land, would have a tremendous detrimental effect to women's sports in the state of Tennessee. Now, your staff has actually gotten me briefed on the issue, on all the laws that we have in place in Tennessee that we wisely put in place early, that protect high school sports, that protect college sports. But how nervous are you when you watch the efforts on behalf of this White House to really try and blow up women's sports?
Well, it's here we go again, right, as the old expression goes. And time again, we've seen this from the Biden administration, to where they try via executive order to subvert state sovereignty, to subvert the 10th Amendment, which empowers states to make decisions relative to this. And here's the irony, Matt, is that, Title IX was put in place back years ago to protect women's sports. And now the Biden administration has issued rules that would subvert laws that we have passed, which you mentioned. We've passed legislation in Tennessee to say if you're a biological male, you cannot participate in women's sports. Period. And at the high school level as well as the college level. And that is good public policy, and it is widely supported by the vast majority of Tennesseans. So now you have a president issuing an executive order to try to subvert that, to try to subvert the will of the people of Tennessee via their elected representatives, and to say, no, you can't have a blanket policy that says no biological males can participate in women's sports. We have that in Tennessee. We have an across-the-board ban on that. If you're a biological male, no matter how you might identify, you cannot compete in women's sports. And that is good public policy. The Biden administration is trying through the U.S. Department of Education, which, by the way, should be dissolved. There is no role for the federal government in education.
Agreed.
That's another story for another day. But through the U.S. Department of Education to subvert that and say that you can't have a blanket policy prohibiting biological men from competing in women's sports. So it's just another example. I can give you many, whether it was COVID vaccine mandates, the shutdowns, things that the Biden administration has tried to do via executive order that are completely contradictory to the will of the people of Tennessee via their elected representatives.
Well, and you make the point of how proactive Tennessee was seeing this coming. And I just want folks to realize that about half of the legislatures across this country have passed similar laws. So it's not like the White House is just coming after us. They are threatening to undo the duly passed laws of about half of the country.
Exactly.
That is weighed in on this, and there are a myriad of other states that are weighing in on it now. And as I looked at the rule, first of all, what they're doing, it's almost like the White House comes up with something daily that would make conservatives' people's heads explode. It seems like a strategy on that part. And I tell people not to get too excited and to take the bait, because this will all have to work its way up to our Supreme Court eventually. And we saw the case in West Virginia where the Supreme Court did not hear the case. That doesn't mean that they would rule against them if the case had gotten there. But as we're watching this play out, and as I looked at this rule, proposed rule, which is insane on its face, but then it says that they could do serious damage as far as withholding federal funds from universities and colleges across Tennessee, not to mention the problems it would cause in high school. But what I found was the most infuriating thing about this is they weren't even consistent in this rule and said that colleges and high schools could make a determination. They didn't have to apply this to all sports, and they could potentially exclude very competitive sports. I mean, what does that even mean? And what does it say to our young women who are working hard to compete in a variety of sports that then the president of a college or a high school principal would have to go in as an administrator and make these decisions on what sports really matter?
Right. Well, you're exactly right. For young ladies in Tennessee that work hard, they train, they prepare, they want to compete in high school athletics, possibly college athletics. Yeah, just think about how disjointed this is. There's no predictability, and that's why we wanted to create predictability in Tennessee by passing blanket bans across the board. And I will say this, Matt, the Constitution does not seem to matter to the Biden administration sometimes.
No, it does
when
not.
they issue some of these things. I am confident that this proposed rule through the Department of Education will be challenged. I don't speak for our Attorney General, but there will certainly be calls from the Tennessee General Assembly, including myself, to our Attorney General, who does an amazing job, Jonathan Skrmetti, to litigate this, to join with other states and take this to court. I can't imagine that if this made its way through the court system, that it would be upheld. That doesn't seem to be of importance to the Biden administration, but it's ridiculous that they would even propose something so preposterous. And again, I want to say something else, and I really applaud our Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton, and others, and I'm certainly involved in this, in disconnecting us from the U.S. Department of Education. We do get money, all states do, through the U.S. Department of Education, and it's high time we in Tennessee said, keep that money. We don't want the federal government having any role whatsoever in education in the state of Tennessee. I think that this unconstitutional action from the Biden White House is just going to add fuel to that fire and encourage us to even act more expeditiously relative to separating ourselves from the federal government when it comes to education.
Well, amen. And I can't thank you for your leadership on this issue enough. Senator, we have to do a quick commercial break. If you could just stay with us for a moment, can I ask you to do that?
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Matt.
And we will be right back with you on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. And we're back on Super Talk, continuing with our coverage with my favorite state senator, because he is my state senator, Jack Johnson. Senator, thanks for staying with us.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that.
Well, we covered what I wanted to cover, which was the critical business as it relates to your constituents and the people of Tennessee. But as we alluded to earlier, there was a lot of noise this session, and we were thrust into the national spotlight or the national media in a way that I think many of us as Tennesseans certainly didn't appreciate. And as it related to the Gang of Three, I find it interesting that now even many on the left are starting to turn on them a bit. Dan Mandis covered this earlier in his program, but Bill Maher, not exactly a voice for conservatives, but I describe him as a classic liberal Democrat, and that's his own words. That's how he describes himself. But he made a comment, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the audio right in front of me, but basically said, grabbing bullhorns and behaving in this manner is what you do perhaps when you're running for office, but you're already in there. You should be doing the people's work and passing legislation or voicing your concerns on legislation, because now you're part of the legislative process. And as we've watched this kind of play out, I think there's a lot of frustration that the national media injected race into this when race was never part of the issue of any of this, but they took that narrative and decided to run with it anyway. I think as the dust is settling, people see this for kind of what it was. And what frustrates me the most is it was a hijacking of dealing with a tragedy and keeping our children safe, and the national media tried to morph that into something else. So as the session is coming to a close, what are your thoughts on this? What are your closing thoughts, kind of lessons learned?
Well, I think your assessment of it, Matt, is completely spot on. You had three individuals who chose to make everything about themselves, not about the people of Tennessee, not about the victims of a horrific shooting at Covenant School, not about the people's business that we try to conduct here when we're in session in the General Assembly. You had three people that wanted to make themselves the center of attention. And they did that by taking control of the House floor, encouraging people to storm the chamber and try to take over the chamber. We all know what they did with the bullhorn and everything else. And as long as I've been in the Senate, and certainly I've been an observer long before that of state government and even federal government, and I've never seen an instance like that where three people were so arrogant and conceited that they felt that they had the right, that they were led to literally shut down the proceedings of the House of Representatives in order to make themselves the center of attention. And I can tell you in Williamson County, and I hear from people all over the state, that it was not well received. And then I think the overwhelming majority, vast majority of Tennesseans thought that it was embarrassing, that it was a poor reflection on the state for them to take that level of action. So again, I'm very careful not to weigh in on House matters, and I've been careful not to weigh in relative to expulsion or reseating them and that type of thing. But I am comfortable in telling you that what those three people did was an embarrassment to the state of Tennessee, and I think that the overwhelming majority of our fellow Tennesseans see it the same way.
I think you're right, and I'm curious, and I've had a lot of super texters ask. I think there's growing frustration that you all took the move to expel these members, and now they're back. And are there any efforts, or is there any talk amongst your colleagues about looking at that so that that when you take the time to expel someone in the future, they can't come and rejoin the assembly?
Well, I think that the House is having that conversation, and rightfully so, because the expulsion took place in the House. I serve in the Senate. Although it from a historical standpoint, some of your listeners may not be aware or may not remember that, we in the Senate, we expelled a member of the Senate just over a year ago. It was a Democrat from Memphis, but she had been convicted of a felony. And when you are a convicted felon, you are ineligible to serve in the General Assembly. And upon her conviction, she refused to resign. So we went through that same exercise in the Senate. So again, I think that members, we're all going to wrap up here in the next few days, and we'll get back home to our districts. And that's one of my favorite times, because I really enjoy getting out in the district and talking to my constituents and talking to various groups, doing basically a session recap of everything that we accomplished and things that we worked on this particular year. And as I'm starting to do that, I'm starting to hear from constituents that just really focus on the fact that what they did was an embarrassment. And so, regardless of what we decide to do moving forward relative to expulsion of members, I hope that it sends a very clear message to all members of the General Assembly that what those three individuals did was highly inappropriate and was very embarrassing for the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, well, amen. And as we talk about the state versus the local, were you as frustrated with me when we decided, or our Nashville Metro decided to pass on the Republican convention? I got to say that offended me as a broadcaster, but it also greatly offended me as someone who supports our local businesses, that decision cost billions of dollars. And before we ended, I wanted to thank you for holding them to account for some of those actions that just aren't in the best interest of anyone in the state.
No, they injected politics, and I'm always clear to say, had it been the Democratic National Convention and they were interested in having that in Nashville, I would have been 1,000% supportive. I wouldn't have attended, but I would have been very supportive of that coming. And for liberal Democrats in Nashville serving on the Metro Council to pass on, I refer to it as the mother of all conventions, because it happens every 4 years. The eyes of the world are on your city and your state, and for them to pass on it for purely political partisan reasons was an embarrassment for the state. And again, cost businesses, cost hotels, restaurants, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue that could have come to Tennessee. So very disappointed in them for doing it. And yes, and I was very supportive of the bill to cap the size of the Metro Council.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for all the tremendous work that you and the other legislators have done during this session. I wish you Godspeed in wrapping it up, and I do hope you can enjoy life a little bit when your service is at least done for the year from a legislative standpoint. So thanks so much, Senator.
Thank you, Matt. Always great to be on with you. Have a great rest of the day.
Great to have you. You too, sir.